Good afternoon.
Good
to
afternoon.
those of you who are following us from Athens, from Greece, and to those who follow from Europe. Good morning for those of you who have registered from the United States of America on this important day. We are here to speak about a small children's book with an important message. But before I do so, I would like to thank our hosts, the beautiful bookstore of Lexikopoleio in the heart of Athens, a bookstore that provides us with Greek, French, and English books and is an active player in its community and this neighborhood. I want to thank you for being with us because this is a very particular little book. It first came to my attention 3 years ago through a Venezuelan friend. She spoke to me about it. She had written a beautiful article about it, in fact. And the article moved me, touched me, and made me feel that it was a relevant story. It is the story of a child that finds itself in great difficulty because his mother likes blue and his father likes red. They tell him that strawberries are red, but that the sky is blue. They tell him that his grandmother likes blue, but his grandfather might like red. This makes the child's life very difficult, and it struggles to find its own solution, particularly as at some point they pressure him to choose himself. Does he like better red or does he like better blue? In fact, we don't know if the child is a boy or a girl, something I particularly like about this book. Back then I thought that I would like to get this book published in Greece. Get it published because I felt it was relevant for my own country. The colors may change. At some point, Greek society was polarized between green and blue. Today, we see polarization between red and blue in the United States. I thought it was relevant, but somehow it didn't work out 3 years ago. And then, over the last months, when all our screens were full of red and blue and some purple, and when I heard the evening of his election, the newly elected US President, President Biden, tell us that for him it was not about red states and blue states, it was about the United States of America. At that point, I knew that the time for our little book had come, and I'm very happy and very grateful to Publishing House Nefeli and to Periklis Douvitsas, to whom I will hand over now, for having succeeded in just a few weeks to publish this book in a beautiful bilingual Greek and English edition. And this is what we want to present. This edition is what we want to present to you this afternoon. So thank you, Periklis, and over to you.
Thank you, Alexandra. I would like to thank you one more time for choosing Nefeli to publish this book. It's an honor for us, and it's a moment in time which is very crucial and very fragile. So I hope this book will start a discussion, international discussion. Democracy is at both times is fragile and resilient. So today we will start an international conversation about what we could do in order to respond to this polarization that we see, for example, in the US. This book originated at the state of emergency Venezuela has experienced in 2013. But since I am just a book publisher, I will try to speak just technically about this book. It is very much symbolic. The choice of the illustrations makes that very clear. There are mostly geometrical shapes. But there is something more there. It is the use of ink. We may think there are just two main colors in the book, red and blue. But in fact, there is more. There are two different reds, two different inks for red, and two different inks for blue. And to add to this, there are three different intensities for each of the two different blues and two different reds. It was not very easy to print this book, I can tell you. And adding to this, when our hero chooses his color, which is purple, the designer had chosen to use a different color, not just a mix of red and blue, which would be what we expect. He chose a new ink for purple. And for me, this is very, very nice, because I think this way we could also imagine balancing or bridging this gap that the polarization has created or creates, for example, in the US. It is like, I understand this book as a tool to see that we can think about the new color not just as a mixture of the both, as as like we understand it as our own color, as a kid in the book understands it. It says it's not just the color that my mom and dad has, both of them, to mix them, but it is my own color. It's the color of the dress of the girl that was in the school and he liked, or she liked. So anyway, this is for me very important. But let me give the word to Mireya Tabuas now, who is the author of the book, and she's a writer, a journalist, and a playwriter, and will talk to us how it was that she came to this book.
En primer lugar, quiero agradecer la publicación del libro Azul y Rojo o Rojo y Azul en Grecia. Para mí es un sueño que este libro se lea en todo el mundo por personas distintas y en distintos idiomas. Cuando comencé a escribir este libro, cuando escribí este cuento en 2013, se había acentuado en mi país, Venezuela, una crisis que ya llevaba muchos años. Dos posiciones políticas se enfrentaban en bandos. La polarización marcada de los extremos ya tenía secuelas más allá de lo político. Colegas, amigos, familias, relaciones se fracturaron por esa causa. Estas posiciones encontradas no se escuchaban y se estaban viviendo momentos tan álgidos que desencadenaron todos los sucesos que han llevado a la destrucción de mi país actual. En 2013 vi con dolor e imaginé cómo sería ese dolor en un niño que estuviese dividido por esa polarización. Entonces escribí la historia y inmediatamente se la envié a mis editores, María Angélica Barreto y Javiera Aispurua. Ellos se enamoraron de la historia y se la dieron al diseñador Ricardo Báez y a la artista del color Patricia Van Dalen, que inmediatamente comenzaron a hacer un trabajo de llevar la imagen, de mis palabras a la imagen. Lo interesante de su proyecto fue que lo hicieron a través de ilustraciones geométricas y eso le otorgaba al libro un valor simbólico que tenía mucha relación con lo que yo quería proponer en el texto. El libro entonces fue publicado en 2014 y fue muy utilizado en escuelas para trabajar temas como la tolerancia. También una comunidad de un sector popular venezolano imprimieron en todas las escalinatas, en una montaña, cada una de las oraciones del libro, y así la gente subía a la escalinata para llegar a sus casas y podían ir leyendo el libro y entendiendo su mensaje. De algún modo el libro también fue, y lamentablemente, mi despedida de Venezuela, de donde partí en 2014 hacia Chile, buscando lo que he dado por llamar una vida normal, es decir, una vida en libertad y sin miedos. Como periodista, yo ya había vivido las consecuencias del proceso polarizador en mi país. Había visto medios cerrados o medios acallados, periodistas amenazados, periodistas detenidos, encarcelados, que lo que simplemente estaban haciendo lo mismo que yo hacía, investigar escribir, denunciar. Eso que les estaba pasando a ellos podía pasarme a mí. Entonces me fui. Me despido reiterándoles que este libro es una suerte de grito, el grito de muchos. Quiero que desde su sencillez sea una ventana para que toda sociedad polarizada se mire y pueda entender que es necesario crear verdaderos espacios de convivencia, verdaderos espacios de comunicación, de respeto, que los pensamientos distintos puedan llegar a entenderse y construir juntos.
Thank you. Thank you for this beautiful message. The author doesn't feel very fluent in English, and she preferred to speak Spanish. That's why we went for a video, a pre-recorded video with subtitles. But I think her message is clear. And what I find particularly interesting is how this book has been taken up in Venezuela under those very difficult conditions and used by a community to, you can see some pictures here, to write on the stairs of this underprivileged Venezuela neighborhood. And I think what is interesting here is this capacity we have, and this is exactly what we want to develop also from Greece, to use this book and use it as an educational tool. That is why I'm so happy that later in our conversations we will be joined by two of the leaders of the most important Greek American schools in Greece, and hopefully we will inspire other schools, not only in Greece, but maybe we can go back to Venezuela, we might find schools outside Greece, maybe in the US, and make this little red and blue book the beginning of a small red and blue movement. And for that, I think there is somebody who can really help us here, and that is our next guest. She is in the United States. She is on the East Coast, so we will say good morning to her. It is Cynthia Farrar. Cynthia is an independent scholar. She is the co-founder of Purple States TV, and I'm extremely happy that she is on our side, because I think she, more than anybody else, can speak about why this little book is important, why what she does in the United States is important with Purple State TV, and why we will all have to be very careful, because Periklis said it earlier, democracy is resilient, but democracy is fragile, and we have to take good care of it. Cynthia, thank you very much for being with us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Alexandra, and thank all of you for the opportunity to be here and to celebrate the publication of this, it may be small, but I think important book. I'd like to wish you all a happy Inauguration Day from America. January 20th, when the newly elected president will become president. 12 years ago, I attended the ceremony, the inauguration ceremony of President Obama with my daughter, among hundreds of thousands of people watching that. And at the time, the idea that there could be a threat to the peaceful transfer of power from one president to another after an election was unimaginable, however revolutionary that particular election was. But already there was acute polarization between red and blue, between Democrats and Republicans. And I had started Purple States TV just before that election in response to this kind of polarization on a range of issues in this country, and issues that were increasingly aligned with one another. And I created Purple States in order to use digital media to bring different voices, different perspectives into the same virtual space, and to engage a broader public in thinking about the divisive questions in this country from the point of view of how they actually affected ordinary people. And my own commitment to facing our divisions and to engaging people across difference began in this country with the civil rights movement, which my mother was very involved in. And I came to feel in college that I could learn more about how a democracy could be more inclusive, could bring in more voices, could attend to more concerns by studying the ancient Athenians, which is what I then did. I got my PhD at Cambridge in ancient political theory, and came to understand more about how the Athenians organized their democracy, created their democracy out of an aristocracy. And when I came back to this country, I eventually got involved in organizing conversations across difference locally, both here in New Haven, Connecticut, where I live, and across the country with a national public television station. And with James Fishkin, who started something called the Deliberative Poll, which, if you don't know about it, I'd encourage you to go to Stanford University's Center for Deliberative Democracy to learn more, because he took elements from ancient Athens, including inviting people randomly and paying them in order to get people together to listen to each other and think about these very divisive issues. But I came to feel by 2007 that in order to take, as we say, to take this opportunity to scale required, as I said a moment ago, using digital media to do that. And that is why I started Purple States at that point. And as I said, things have gotten much, much worse since then. So although I think that what Purple States does continues to be important, I think that there is, has always been and will go on being so much more that we all need to do. The Athenian democracy itself, as many of you may know, was born out of a need to end divisive factionalism. And the demos joined forces with one of the aristocratic leaders to lay the groundwork for democracy. And they recognized that we need a structure in democracies to bring all voices in through things like using the lot and rotation and pay, but also, and perhaps more relevant to today and this book, is the idea of mixing people just as part of what we ordinarily do, which is increasingly difficult in this society where we are divided now geographically and by culture and by education and by race and by class, and that those factors tend to align with each other, which makes it extremely hard for us to engage with each other. So bridging is ever more necessary, but it's ever more difficult. And so we have a chicken and egg problem. Where do we start and how can we possibly start? And that's why small, and many kinds of initiatives that we can build on, like this Red and Blue book, are so important. And I agree wholeheartedly with what you, Alexandra, said, and Mireya said as well. I think it's very important that this book is not about politics per se. It's not about partisanship. It focuses on differences that there's really no arguing with, right? So in the work I do, the point is not to talk people out of their preferences or their values or their beliefs or their opinions. The point is to find ways in which we can find common ground enough so that we can have civil conversations and together preserve the kinds of norms that protect that. So it's incredibly important that these differences are abstract, but they're also incredibly concrete. And it's very powerful that that's where the child starts, with strawberries or a grandmother's eyes. And that what we're getting is not pious injunctions, of which we get, many these days. We're all human, what we would call in America, sort of kumbaya moment, let's all come together. But it's about very concrete differences and similarities. So old people with canes on both sides, for example. So just to wrap up, I think it suggests that we can find common ground in seeing different things, right? In seeing purple things, not becoming purple people or having purple preferences, but to see different things, look at different things together, even as we go on seeing things differently, and come to see where red and blue intersect and build on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia. We will get back to you at the end of our discussion for your concluding remarks. Our next guest is not with us for not a language issue, but a time difference issue. It's Professor Josiah Ober. He's Professor of Classics and Political Sciences at Stanford University. This is a man who profoundly, like you, Cynthia, believes that we can deepen our understanding of what's going on today by looking more closely at what happened in the original Athenian democracy. I would like just to cite him here. He says, "We must work together to make the ancient Greek vision of collective self-government by citizens into a powerful resource for repairing and restoring democracy in today's troubled world." Jos Ober also speaks about the danger of believing in the tyranny of majority, as he puts it, because what Greek democracy was all about was not about the power over a defeated minority. It was the power of a community of engaged citizens to do things together. So common ground that you, Cynthia, mentioned several times is, I think, the important word here, as well as, of course, dialogue, respect, and acceptance of divisions and differences. So we have received a video from Professor Ober, that 3-minute video that we're going to share with you now.
From Palo Alto, California. My name is Josiah Ober. I'm a professor here in Stanford University, where I teach in the classics department, also in the political science department, and I also have a little bit of an appointment in philosophy. It's a great honor to be part of this celebration of blue and red, red and blue. I'm sorry I can't be with you in person, but I am there in spirit. Here at Stanford, we have a new initiative that we're calling the Stanford Civics Initiative. The goal is entirely in line with the ambitions of red and blue, blue and red, because what we're hoping to do is bring together students who have very different viewpoints, who see their commitments as being either on the red side or the blue side of the political spectrum, to allow them to engage in really serious conversations with each other, not giving up their commitments, but listening hard to each other and recognizing perhaps that they have more in common than they had thought of in the first place. We've just started our initiative, but it's going well so far. We're rolling out a program that will ensure that every Stanford student has a chance to take a course in civic education that will introduce them to some of the basic ideas that sit behind the red and blue, blue and red ideal. So I'm trying to do something here that is building on the absolutely essential work that must start at a much earlier age, because by the time children have grown up to become college students, it's already harder to convince them that what they should be doing is listening to each other and finding common ground. With this book, perhaps we can teach children at a very early age that the confluence of these beautiful colors is possible, that they can choose to have strong views, but they can listen to the views of others, and in the end they may find that their real heart is much more purple than it is either red or blue, blue or red. Thank you again. Have a wonderful celebration of this moment. This is a historic day, and I'm very, very glad that the kind of dedication to finding common ground that I believe can go forward in my country, in the United States, in Greece, and elsewhere, is being celebrated and commemorated in this way. Thank you again.
Well, I think this is an important information we just heard. It is, again, going a step further. It is telling us about a new civic education project that starts in Stanford. We have been discussing with Professor Ober over the last months. We do hope from our position, from the World Human Forum, to promote this project, to connect it to other universities, certainly in Greece, but not only, connect it also to the younger ages, the ages where, as Professor Ober said, everything starts. And this, I believe, is one of the outcomes of what we want to do. We won't leave it there. We would like to go a step further and have some real impact on our societies. I will hand over now to Periklis again, who will introduce our guest from Greece this time, another professor, George Pagoulatos.
So, Joseph Pagoulatos is Professor of European Politics and Economy at the Athens University of Economics, but he is also the Director of the Hellenic Foundation for European and Foreign Policy, and I would like to cite here, the Foundation's mission is to conduct policy-oriented research and contribute to the development of evidence-based responses to major European and foreign policy challenges. So, Mr. Pagoulatos, having heard the previous speakers, how do you suggest we go on? What should we do from here?
Well, thanks so much, first of all, for this wonderful initiative on a beautiful book in a very important day for American democracy and the world. This is very important, first of all, because it highlights the importance of difference. We are different. We live in pluralistic societies. And we take our difference and our views and our individuality very importantly. We take our values and our ideas very importantly. And sometimes we passionately argue in support of our views. But we should always be aware that other people also have their views, and they come from different places from where we come. And we have many things in common, starting from our human quality. And it's very important when we disagree with other people to always consider that they are human beings like us, and we share so many things. We are in the same boat, and maybe we're not entirely right on all our views. Maybe they have a point, and it's very important to understand that democracy is about negotiating our differences in order to be able to peacefully coexist. Because the alternative to democracy is war of all against all. That's how it is, and it's a rule of the game where we have to agree to a certain set of minimum rules in order to be able to peacefully coexist without fighting with each other, which would be a mutually destructive outcome. And these minimum rules of the game have to do with this basic premise of respecting a basic constitution, the rule of law, respecting the rights of the minority, not resorting to a tyranny of the majority, because we are many. We can crash on those who are fewer, who are weaker. Democracy is about guarantees for the weaker. It's about guarantees for the minority. It's about guarantees for freedom for everyone. On his last State of the Union address, President Obama had this beautiful phrase. Democracy, he said, grinds to a halt without the willingness to compromise, or when basic facts are disputed, or when we only listen to those who agree with us. And it's these three main things that are very important to understand, that democracy is built on a constant effort to find compromises, small compromises that at the end of the day will make us all better off than they were when we started. That democracy is about understanding that we will always have differences with other people, and we constantly have to find points of agreement so that we can all move forward. And sometimes some gain more than others in a stage, and then in another stage, this will be reversed. But compromise is the constant name of the game if we live in democratic societies. And the other thing is that our understanding must be grounded on facts. We have the right to our views, to our opinions. We're entitled to our opinions, but we're not entitled to our facts. And I say that because after the last 4 years, this has become a very relevant comment. We cannot construct our own alternative world, our own defactualized world, and go ahead believing that what we have constructed as in our mind are actual facts. The facts cannot be disputed, and they are important in order to find a common basis of reference that brings us all together. And finally, we have to discuss not only with those that we agree with, but especially and even more so with those we disagree with, because that's a way not just to understand where they stand, but also to keep in mind that we share a common human quality. Dehumanizing the other, demonizing the other is the beginning of a great divides within societies that has led to tragedies and civil wars and terrible atrocities in the history of humankind. So it is important to talk with each other. We live in societies where it's very tempting to engage in our own bubble, to live in our social media bubble or in our small community where like-minded people tend to believe that they're always right and they tend to develop contempt for others. We have to break this and try to reach out to understand how other people think and to expose ourselves to their criticism and to their views, because that's the basis, not just of mutual understanding, it's the basis of democratic coexistence in our society. It's very important to start cultivating these ideas from the younger stages, and that's why civic education at school, even at primary school, should be of the utmost priority. We've seen the results of divided societies. We've seen the results where people have stopped fighting for the civic values, have stopped believing in the value of being citizens and defending democracy. And we have to keep in mind that democracy is a work of the citizens. It's not just a work, it's not a project of the executive or the legislature or the media. Democracy is a game that needs to involve committed citizens every day, and citizens who are engaged in the civic values that I have tried to mention. So thank you very much for this wonderful initiative, and I'm happy to give the floor back to Alexandra or Periklis.
Thank you, Professor Pagoulatos. And yes, we are in agreement with you. We believe schools is where we must go next. And this is why we are going to join now Mrs. Peggy Pelonis, President of the American Community School in Athens, who is with us and who will tell us from her point of view how this little book can or could be used to engage civic education at the earliest age, possibly as early as preschool or primary school children. Ms. Pelonis, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Alexandra, and hello, everyone, and thank you for this gracious invitation to join you in this very, very important discussion. And I just want to start by saying that I think, from the mouths of kids, you hear the wisest of comments. And democracy, I think, is about courage. It's a more difficult path, but yet it's a more meaningful path, I believe. So democracy, as some of you already mentioned, is not something that's static. It's something that needs active participation. It manifests in our daily actions. It means that many voices are heard and synthesized into what is most meaningful and most optimal. And it starts with dialogue. It also means that we must have the ability to listen, to really hear different perspectives, different needs, different points of view, and to do it with respect. It doesn't mean that we always agree with other perspectives, but that we hear each other and that we consider the other person. And so through honest dialogue and active listening, we find common solutions. Now, this, I think, it requires a particular mindset. And that mindset is set in children. It's formed in children at a very young age. And I think we all know that children learn best, not necessarily by what we tell them or teach them, but by watching us adults and by watching how we live our lives, watching what we do in our lives. So the concept of democracy in schools is essential, and it must be a daily living experience because it presupposes that we respect others and develop conscious citizenship. In schools, it takes place through active listening to kids, through listening to their needs, their ideas. It doesn't matter that they're younger or less knowledgeable or less experienced, because the idea is to listen with respect and to invite kids to participate in dialogue. This is how democracy is applied. So a conscious citizen is one who's aware of social issues that need attention, and they take their knowledge and their skill and they turn it into action to improve life or living on the planet. And they do this through an ethical lens. So the mindset is one of ethical decision-making and respect for all living things. It's vital for students to feel that by actively participating in dialogue, that they can be empowered to believe that they can play a role in the change, in any change. This will give them the courage that they need to facilitate change and eventually, as they grow older, to initiate change. This is part of being a responsible, active citizen. And schools are microcosms of the world. And they're important platforms where democracy can flourish. So in giving, we had the opportunity to give this book, wonderful little book, to some of our young children, read to them, or, children read it to one another. And then it was really, really interesting to hear their comments. And I'd like to share some of those comments with you. And as we proceed, we'll do more of this, but here's some of the comments. One young seven-year-old said, "My friend and I both like the same color, but it's okay if your friend likes a different color. It's what your heart chooses." And another one is, "I like the kid who said their favorite color was purple." Another child said, "I think democracy is good because it gives us all rights." Or another student said, "Everyone should have a voice." And then again, "I like the book because it shows that it's okay not to choose." And the most popular, most common comment of all was, "I vote for purple." So, I think children have a wisdom about them, and they can understand, surprisingly, they can understand these kinds of concepts at a fundamental and as well as a practical level. And so I think when you give them the opportunity to express themselves through dialogue, they do so without filters. And it's the best kind of information that we can have to help develop, because we are in education, I think we're in the business of people making. And I think in this way, we can develop children and who tomorrow will become conscious world citizens. So this was a very good opportunity through this book to put some of that into practice. Thank you.
Peggy, thank you very much, and we very much look forward to continue working with you and your students with this little book, and hopefully be joined by other schools and make this project bigger. And there is another school actually in Greece, Professor Costas Synolakis, who is a very well-known professor of civil and environmental engineering at the University of the Engineering School of the University of Southern California, has very recently occupied a new position as the president of the Hellenic-American Educational Foundation, very well known in Greece as the American College in Greece. And Costas Synolakis is traveling this afternoon. He's flying actually to a Greek island, Ikaria, for some environmental problem there. But he has chosen a very special place in Athens to send us his message. He will probably join us live in the last round of our conversation. But the place he chose to speak to us, you will probably recognize. And if you don't, then let me just say a few words. It's Pnika. It's at the foot of the Acropolis. It's the place where, for the first time, Athenian citizens, back at the origins of Athenian democracy, gathered to experiment government by the people, for the people, in such a unique way that created the Athenian democracy. So let us listen to what Costas Synolakis has to tell us before engaging in the final round of our conversation.
Good afternoon. I'm sitting here in Pnika in Athens. It's here, the cradle of Western civilization, where over 2,000 years ago, people stood behind me on this rock and deliberated all the affairs of the city. The publication of Red and Blue, or Blue and Red, by Mireya Tabuas is a moving story, but also a proposal for educating people towards a democracy at a very young age, when their entire world is just family, friends, toys, shapes, and colors. However, even at this very young age, people get exposed to the narrow-mindedness of adults. The results are often poorly educated children, or worse, self-centered adults who have not learned to respect the opinions and beliefs of others. The little child of the story, wanting to please both parents, whom she loves dearly, shows there is always a third way of seeing things, a way of bridging differences, of avoiding divisions and reaching to a synthesis. And this synthesis of contrasting things is more often than not beautiful and incredibly exciting. Mireya Tabuas' optimistic book shows a way for educators and schools to reform curricula and include subjects and activities that can educate students towards democracy and, of course, a better future for humanity. On December 10, 1948, the United Nations passed Resolution 26, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It specifies that education is an unalienable human right. Education shall be directed to the full development of the human personality and to the strengthening and respect of human rights and fundamental freedoms. It shall promote understanding, tolerance, and friendship among nations, racial or religious groups. In today's world of constant change and networks, we need to include programs on education of democracy and educate global citizens and prepare them for the real world and global collaboration. The biggest challenge that is facing humanity for the next 100 years is climate change. And without global collaboration and informed citizens who can work together, we are doomed. Respect and diversity for human respect for diversity and social justice must be key components to school life. Bringing students from diverse environments together broadens horizons, enriches experiences, and gives an opportunity to reconsider assumptions and create bridges of communications with other civilizations and people who appear different than us. This must be the school's first priority. In the development of societies through history, the individual and society can flourish in a balanced manner only when there is respect and harmony between the citizen and the state. Democracy is the only form of organization that contributes in a meritocratic, equal, and free way to the expression of ideas and to new transformative initiatives that we really need for our collective future. The school can shape the culture and attitude of life and the consciousness that democratic citizens need to have. Participating in organized activities, young students can realize the importance of dialogue, pluralism, diversity, but also meritocracy and struggling for one's ideas. All of the above contribute to the democratic ideal. Democracy is a way of life. It is the supreme legacy of Hellenism to the world. But today, there is another celebration, and this is the inauguration of the 46th President of the United States, who is taking over after a tumultuous and soon-to-be-forgotten dark period for the United States. The entire world wishes him well. And on this day, I'm reminded of another great American president, Abraham Lincoln, who said upon education, "I can only say that I view it as the most important subject which people can engage in." Thank you.
Well, a beautiful message from a beautiful, highly symbolic place in this world. I'm really glad that Costas Synolakis chose to go to Pnika to send us his message. We are sorry not to have him live with us. We will try. We might find him, we might not. And now we will engage in the final concluding remarks of our guests. And maybe we should go back where we started a little earlier today, go back to Cynthia Farrar in the US and let her conclude her comments on our discussion. And then I want to tell you that we do have a lot of your comments. There's a lot that has been sent to us. We will try to connect to a few of you after the concluding remarks of our guests. So please don't hesitate to stay with us to listen to what you have to say. And of course, we will be open to continue the discussion even, obviously, after today. So, Cynthia, back to you.
So I've been very interested in this conversation. Just to pull out a couple of things. One, George, when you were talking about the importance of agreeing on facts, and as you said, I mean, it's become incredibly clear in these last years, especially, that that's something we have to figure out. And I actually came up with an idea for a project I called Red and Blue Facts, which, as somebody said to me, that just means facts, right? So we could call it Purple Facts, but is there a way of using techniques of deliberation across difference to sort out what people can agree is true? And I think engaging citizens in that work would be incredibly powerful. And then Peggy, you were talking, I was very struck by the comment of a child that it's okay not to choose. And I think that's deeply important, because one of the reasons America has gotten to where it is because of the most partisan people. And that has really divided us, and that's what's taken over, especially the national stage. And so how can we divide things so that this is not about choosing a side, it's about expressing what matters to you without making it align with any particular political position. And I think that's deeply important. And then lastly, the only thing I would say I disagree with Costas about is I hope America never forgets this dark period. As I said earlier, the polarization began well before Donald Trump and was partly, I think, instrumental in his election, and it will go on after him. So I think we need to use this period as a reminder of what's at stake. And a book like this one can help us do that.
Thank you, Cynthia. George, do you want to comment?
Yes, wonderful comments and a very good synthesis by Cynthia. Let me start from the last point that she made, because democracies actually, I think, rest on two pillars. One is remembering, historical memory, having knowledge of where we come from and what we've been through, a kind of a collective consciousness. And the other one is forgetting what has divided us in the past, not in terms of the knowledge that one can derive from it, but in terms of the passions and the heated animosity that traumatic experiences have left behind. This is the only way that societies that have gone through experiences such as civil wars or apartheid have been able to overcome these traumas and build unity without forgetting, but remembering and reconciling. So it's very important to know what happened, and I fully agree with Cynthia, but it's also very important to look forward and not to recycle the kind of the passions that have brought about the worst moments in a nation's history or in a democracy's trajectory. There are countries, my country, your country, Cynthia, that have lived through civil wars. In your case, a few centuries ago, in our case, in the 20th century. And the only way we could build democracies and build a parliamentary system where we could respect each other was to combine these two pillars together, right? Knowing what happened, having an understanding of history, but also being willing to forget and to reconcile and to move forward. The second thing I'd like to say is if I were to choose one thing from the kind of culture that democracy requires is the culture of toleration. It's enormously important to tolerate each other's views in the way that, the Enlightenment philosophers taught us about. Voltaire said, I disagree with passion with what you believe, with your views, but I will defend your right to say what you say. Toleration is about understanding our differences, about celebrating our differences, but it's about defending the other's right to hold their views. And it is only through a culture of tolerance that we can coexist in societies that are becoming ever more complex, ever more diverse. And this diversity is something we need to celebrate. I see Costas Synolakis is with us, so I will stop here and pass the floor to Costas Synolakis.
Well,
hello, everyone.
Thank you, George. Hello, Costas. So we will give the floor first to Peggy. That is the order we introduced the four of you. So Peggy, back to you, and then Costas, you will have the final closing remarks for this round. Oh, I think, Peggy, we cannot hear you. Your mic is closed.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Sorry about that.
Good.
I just want to say that I think we're living in an age where everything is moving at light speed, and that's particularly the case with technology. And so, these continuous and multiple changes, it's so easy to get lost in that frenzy. And so I think young people are often nowadays questioning a lot of the traditional mindsets that provided purpose for past generations. And today there's visible and invisible enemies everywhere. There's a threat to safety, a threat to democracy, a threat to well-being. And what does success really mean? Does it really mean, people being happy? So it's important to provide a platform in schools where students can be guided to self-reflect and to connect to a higher purpose, such as the ideals of democracy, so that students can be helped to understand that through their actions and ways of being in the world, they can either contribute to a better world, they can contribute to a worse world, or they can remain neutral and not contribute at all. So when children learn to self-reflect, like adults need to self-reflect on their actions and ways of being in the world, then our actions become more intentional rather than based on habit. So, and I think we're placing a lot of hope on the youth, but I think it's time. We keep saying, we messed it all up and you need to fix it. And I think it's the other way around. We need to help young people live in a better world, and through educating them, and with such ideals as democracy is one way to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Peggy. Yes, participative citizenship and shared responsibility for what happens to us and to our world tomorrow is, I think, at the core of all this. Costas, when I introduced you, I said that you started, and for many years were teaching at university level in the engineering school. Now you are holding a new position, brand new position, at a school that goes down to kindergarten and primary school. So maybe for your closing remarks, you can tell us how you can see this necessity. And we heard Jos Ober telling us earlier about engaging from Stanford in a new citizenship program, curriculum. It would be interesting for us to hear from you. You have been working with older students, with students at university level. Now you will be faced with shaping also what the school does for younger children. Let us close with your remarks on that.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. And this is an incredible initiative. Comes at a fantastic time. It's a great occasion. Today is also formally the January the 20th is the Martin Luther King Day, as well. And what I have noticed in recent years is in schools the polarization of views that is fueled by the by extreme views that are circulating in the internet, and of course, the president of the United States, ex-President Trump, he will be exiting probably in a couple of hours, has not helped that at all. I would agree with Peggy that we really need to do our part to make the world better, and I mean in the sense of educating the kids, and this is where it takes an incredible amount of critical thinking to be able at the same time to celebrate different and divergent views, but at the same time being able to evaluate them. It is extremely hard to say to someone, yes, this is one point of view, when the other person is defending it and trying to encourage kids to find the middle ground. When there is, when extremism is in place. So this is a huge challenge for us, and starting early on with books like Red and Blue and Blue and Red is incredibly helpful, because as we look forward, I think we're going to face more and more of the same. I mean, things are going to get, in my view, worse before they get better, before we manage to train, the new generation into critical thinking. And before we end up doing our part, and I think the citizens of the United States did their part in the recent election to try to put this balance and find out how we can golf and put a bridge between different points of view. So I will not take more time. I mean, as I said, this is an incredible moment in history. I'm glad this thing is happening, and I'm very privileged to be part of it. And thank all of you for being here and watching it.
Thank you, Costas, and thank you all. We are getting messages from Venezuela. We didn't connect with anybody there, but we're getting many messages thanking us for what we're doing. We're also getting messages from Kenya, from Berlin, from London. You are all over the place. This is the beauty of a digital presentation. Of course, we do look forward in this wonderful place that is hosting us to organize again book presentations with people all around us. But for the moment, I think we did the best we could under those difficult circumstances. And I want to thank you all again, our guests, our viewers, and looking forward to do more about Red and Blue in the future. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you, Alexandra.
Thank you. Take good care, everyone.
Take care.